Hey, so a while ago, I made this video on my theory and predictions for Chapter 3 of Your Turn to Die, and specifically about how I think many fans are mistaken about the logic root. The truth is, that video was partially inspired by the increasing prevalence of something called the Memorandum Theory, which I happen to disagree with. I didn't go into it in that video as I just wanted to supply my own theory based on the evidence in the game, instead of going on the offensive and attacking an existing theory. But I still had people in the comments citing this theory without really backing it up in any way, so I feel this is a relevant addendum. Later into this video, I will also be adding on to my original theory with supplementary information I originally just feel didn't fit, since I wanted it to be compact and to the point. This particular video isn't meant to be too serious, so don't expect something as highly and specifically edited. Just enjoy this gameplay in the background. If you've never heard of the Memorandum Theory, I'd suggest checking out this popular video by Your Turn to Rant. It's pretty well put together and a good watch to get an idea of what the theory is about, even if you, like me, disagree with its conclusions. I want to make it clear that this video is not meant as an attack on anyone, and if you harass anyone over this, you're a loser and shouldn't be in this community. This response isn't going to be a comprehensive takedown or anything. I just want to address the main points, as I believe this theory is fundamentally flawed. So, what are those points? Number 1. Our game's outcomes resemble those of the Hades incident outlined in the memorandum found by Sara during Chapter 2, Part 2 Exploration. Number 2. Asunado, or someone in Asunado, is attempting to recreate the events of the original, but with the girl, who appears much like Sara, as the survivor. And number 3. The logic root is the one wherein the memorandum is adhered to and the desired outcome is created. Let's begin with a reading of the memorandum, as it isn't too long. Quite some time has passed since then, but even now, those hellish memories are scorched into the back of my mind. In the first trial, I killed a person. I would never trust others. That was what I decided. In the Russian roulette that followed too, I didn't participate. At the end of their argument, the challenger chosen was someone most surprising. A 17-year-old schoolgirl. With overwhelming charisma, she had a talent for getting people in order. And in the first victim conference, she was a central figure as well. But there, she lost her best friend. And then the second victim conference. A boy even younger than her, and the man whose views most aligned with hers. These two died. Seeing her so exhausted, I felt pity. For the first time, I spoke my true feelings. By the time we were done talking, I had acquired an admiration for her. To the point that I would be fine with even my own death as long as she had won it all. But in the third victim conference, she died. It was the first time I'd shed tears for a stranger. Even now, I see hallucinations of her. As many women as I try to love, I am never satisfied. Even now, to me, she is. The message ends here, half-written. Clearly, the protagonist bears a strong resemblance to Sara. There's no disputing that. The first victim conference, or as we might call it, the main game, goes similarly as well. Though we can't verify it was through analogous means to the sacrifice in the case of the Hades incident, her best friend's death conveniently takes place at the same time as Joe's death. And that is where it begins to get shaky at best. A boy younger than her and the man whose views most aligned with hers. That's clearly supposed to be Keiji and Gin. If there is a parallel at all, right? No matter what you say, trying to associate any of these to So, Kana, or Nao is a stretch. Two of the victims were girls, and So certainly isn't a boy younger than Sana or the man whose views most aligned with hers. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's important to remember the point in the game in which we discover this memorandum. In Chapter 2, Part 2, prior to the main game. So by this point, we'd experienced the first main game. And up until that point in the memorandum, everything seems dead on. From an authorial perspective, the placement of this finding is clearly meant to raise suspense for the second main game. Like, are we actually repeating history? Did we secretly receive some insight into how this game will actually go? The answer is no, because it didn't. I think it's fairly justified to say that the characters in the memorandum mirror the characters of our own death game. But you'd more or less have to concede that Joe's death lining up is just a coincidence, or that mirroring the original game is not the goal. That brings us to point number 2, that someone is trying to recreate the events but with Sada as the survivor. Namely, most claim that the mastermind is the survivor of the original Hades incident, and thanks to the connection he formed with the girl being so deep that he never got over it, as the current head of Asunaro, he wants to make it so she wins and is appointed the new head. I won't refute that the previous winner of the game is the mastermind. In fact, that makes perfect logical sense. I don't even refute that he wants Sada to win. After all, we know the game is for her sake. But when you try to get how this outcome is being achieved, it falls apart rather quickly. Let's start with Joe's death. This is something that would be necessary under the theory, as it would set the stage for Sada to return to her true self, cunning and ruthless. Why did Joe die? Well, it's because Kyutaro placed the sacrifice in a random spot, and then Kana happened to pick it up, and then So saw her pick it up, took it from her, and placed it elsewhere, since he knew that being killed if someone saw your card was a dummy roll, and then Joe later came by the bar and picked it up. Do you see the problem? This is way too random. Well, you say, Joe is a non-candidate, so he would eventually be killed anyway. No, actually. There is no mechanism in the game to prevent a non-candidate from winning. How do I know? Because Gashu had to betray his own rules and orders in order to get the last one killed, exposing way more about the game in the process. And here again we have an instance of unpredictable human decision-making. It's more likely that non-candidates are just joker cards, and them winning would mean the end of the organization, which as a loyalist, Gashu cannot overlook. Though that's just speculation. And one more thing. If they wanted Ruthless Sada to win, they could have, I don't know, not included Joe? Seriously, it was stated that he was included literally as a handicap to even out the odds with all the other candidates. Because of all this, I think it would be legitimately bad writing if some kind of all according to plan thing was pulled in the finale, and I trust Nankidai more than that. And then the final point. The logic root represents the ideal scenario for the mastermind. If you've watched my original video, you know why I think this is false. Sada has resolved herself not to become the person Midori thinks she is. Thanks to Kyutaro's effort to connect with her, Ruthless Sada is no more. This won't go the way the Game Masters want it to, and Sada's logical choice will begin to bear fruit. Escape will become possible. Some posit that, whether Sada or So wins, this is a desirable outcome for the mastermind, since So is analogous to the writer of the Memorandum. We can't really confirm that he is. In fact, there isn't really any evidence in the Memorandum to point to this, but I'll grant it, since I could see the story going in that direction. Even if I do, I don't really see how this can be the case. There's just no evidence for it. You need to make a massive leap. He said in the Memorandum that he would be fine with his own death so long as the girl won. Do you think he would be satisfied with the facsimile of himself killing her? That sounds like the opposite. If I may posit my own interpretation, granting that the mastermind is analogous to So, and he's manipulating the events to achieve an outcome, here's one that I consider at least as valid. His ideal scenario is for them to escape together and live. See, it's equally as speculative, except it would actually line up better with the game as we know it. I'm not saying I believe that, it's not the point. To me, the Memorandum theory requires you to assume the conclusion and fit everything else around it, rather than building on the evidence from the ground up. It veers so far into speculation that at some points it just feels like fanfic. You created an entire vision for the game based on narrow assumptions. And it's telling because, at least where I'm standing, the existence of the final death game point I talked about is nearly a complete defeater, and it's just right in front of us. In order to keep the Memorandum theory, you have to ignore this, and ignore the scene between Saragin and Kyutaro. Am I saying the Memorandum holds no relevance? No. If you've been keeping up, you should know that. I think it will be crucial to understanding the mastermind, their motivations, and the background of the death game. I am not ignoring it, I am just taking it as is. And that's pretty much all I had to say on the Memorandum theory. I don't buy it. If you disagree with any of my points, feel free to voice why in the comments. I just urge that you actually take the time to understand what I'm saying and not just regurgitate points I've already addressed back at me. Let's have a dialogue, not a spitting match. And as always, all opinions are valid, even if I happen to disagree. It's just a funny video game. But we're not quite done yet. There's some more I want to talk about in regards to being a follow-up to the first video. I want to talk a little more about So, and not too much more, as I will definitely have a video down the line covering him in full detail, and boy will it be long. But I want to add on to what I said in the first video, and maybe help you see why I think his character development will go in a direction of growth rather than regress, beyond demonstrating why the escape is probable. Let's talk about themes. Themes are arguably the most important factor when it comes to predicting the outcome of a story. Anything can be written into canon at a whim, but understanding what the story is attempting to communicate to the audience can put us in the mind space of the writer and allow us to examine their intent. There is no such thing as a bad person. This is a line in Prayer, the main theme song of the game. And it's something the game is committed to, so much that Nankidai went back and gave more context to Gashu's actions. Safalin occasionally shows glimpses that she isn't too enthusiastic about what she has to do, and even Miley has helped us out for mysterious purposes. There was a time when Alice and Kai weren't trustworthy either, one a murderer and the other a stalker. But as they opened up to the rest and we learned more about them, our perspective began to shift. Joe struggled to trust at first, but ultimately he couldn't bring himself to continue distrusting because, at his heart, he's someone who sees the best in people. Before his death, he says that he believes Alice, Kai, So, everyone is a good person. There are no bad people. What makes So different from them is that he doesn't open up. He keeps his heart at a distance. That is his greatest character flaw in the lens of the narrative that values trust. His fellow participants make assumptions about him, and to an extent, it's his fault for letting this happen and embracing a persona that isn't his. But at the same time, it doesn't make us right for always interpreting him in a poor light, when in the game's world, we should be like Joe. Empathy isn't naivete, it's correct. And the one who knows this best is the girl who saw So's value from the beginning, Kana Kizuchi. Kana isn't stupid or helpless. In her own way, she's mature, intelligent, and perceptive. This is shown when we learn in her route that she knew all along that the message on her phone wasn't from her sister, but So. And even before that, she was the one who tried to convince us to, in her own words, choose logic. So that's why it's so odd to me that people are so quick to dismiss her if it also means throwing So under the bus. Kana believes, no, she knows, that So wanted to protect her. Her kind hallucinations say as much. And when she dies in the logic route, some of her last words are a plea for us to believe in So. You believe in both of them, or you believe in neither. And I think, under the lens of the game's messages, there's a correct answer. for the game to turn around and tell us we're wrong, to prove that Kana's a useless child who doesn't understand anything, and that So is undeserving of our empathy, that we were wrong to trust, would be a spit in the face and a rejection of everything the game has been telling us up to this point. It would retroactively invalidate not just this route, but the entire game. And that's why I don't believe it will happen. So how will we get to where So develops into someone who can trust and be trusted? I'm not gonna pretend I have all the details of how that will unfold. There's just too much we don't know. At that point, you just want me to write the entire chapter for you. But it's not as though there is nothing we can speculate on. So is not going to break out of his current state on his own, so what could possibly be the catalyst for his change? I believe it will be like Domino's, the toy, not the pizza. Kyutaro connected with Sada. No, he saved Sada as we know her. Now it's her turn. Someone else is keeping their heart at a distance. Someone else needs to be saved. No matter how difficult, Sada will save Shin Tsukimi. And that's the gist of why I believe So's character will ultimately lead him up, not down. Let's bring the atmosphere back to something more casual, though, because I want to give some miscellaneous thoughts and responses before we move on to the final part of the video. First, the idea that the only people left besides So are the ones who voted for Kana. Ooh, spooky. That means he's got them right where he wants them. He's gonna kill them all. No, come on. Writing-wise, it's just a good idea to have them all together, regardless of what the outcome is going to be. It'll be addressed, absolutely. Doesn't mean it'll go the way you think it will, especially if it contradicts everything else we know. But he said he'd do it. Yeah, he said that in a fit of rage after his only close one died. Okay? And through all his lies and untruths, you're choosing to believe him on this one specifically? Seems a little selective, especially given how passive he's been through the whole chapter. He could have pulled a Ranmaru at any point, but instead he's just tired and passive-aggressive. Look, it's clear there's a lot going through his mind. He's a guy who tends to keep to himself, especially now that the only person who saw him for who he was is gone. Though it might seem he's been sidelined in 3-1, it's more that he's sidelined himself. He's depressed and confused about his emotions, his want for revenge, his knowledge that it's not what Kana would want, what Midori's appearance means, remembering how he used to be with the Shin AI. When an opportunity presents itself in 3-2, I believe that he will briefly entertain his darker thoughts. He might go ahead and try something. And that's a perfect moment for him and Sada to scream and cry their feelings, and for the connection to begin. Things will get worse before they get better, and growth spouts from turmoil. That's how great stories are often written. Also, this is just my own speculation, but I feel like since every chapter part has a discussion, this might be what that is in this route, since the main game probably isn't happening. It's going to be this final confrontation between all of the participants and So. The sort of final discussion that will bring the end of his development. But yeah, that's just what I would like to see. And that's all I needed to say in regards to the logic route. But since this is probably the last time I'll get to talk about theories in a video like this, let's go over some other theories. Gin Mastermind Theory. No, I don't really find there to be any strong evidence for this at all. He did know or have something we didn't, which allowed him to see the secret passageway, but there's nothing to suggest that means he's the mastermind. We still don't know his first trial, and he could have been given something to balance his low odds of survival.
and given his backstory, I find it extremely unlikely that he's involved with Asunado. I also don't believe there will be some huge twist regarding the mastermind. That's just an assumption people make based on the genre, when the possibility of one of the players being the mastermind hasn't even been referenced in Your Turn to Die once. In fact, the closest we get is the suspicion of a possible collaborator, which was Joe's idea before he decided to trust everyone. Everything stacks against this theory. It's more of a meme than anything at this point. Miley is Gein's mom. I actually find this one more plausible. We know that Emiri Harai had a fiancé whom Asunado seems to have messed with in order to move her from her comfortable position, which could have been Gein's father, who is known to be an alcoholic and generally not a great parental figure. Worth noting that he was a fiancé at the time of what Asunado did to him, meaning Emiri would have not taken the Ibushi name if it was him. This would also play into why Miley has been shown to help us, such as by giving internal documents and announcing Gashi's transgression. It's possible that Gein actually left through the secret passageway to go check up on her. A lot of things add up here, and personally I kinda believe it. Sara is a doll. This should be easily dismissed by the fact that she can die at several points and we see blood. This is a rule. Dolls do not bleed. Miley and Sefalin are humans. But what if she's just built different? Come on, that's just ignoring evidence to make stuff up. Why would we be given an anti-clue? And it's not even a good red herring because we just have to take their rules at face value. I won't dedicate any more time to this. Sara is a human but was created artificially with Asunado tech? Cool thought, I guess? I don't know where you can possibly find the evidence for that, and it isn't cited in the link I was given. Sara is the mastermind, and she doesn't know. It's clear that Sara is involved with the purpose behind the death game. The designs of the floor masters are modeled after her favorite types of food, and before Hayasaka died, he said the death game must be for her sake. Island Existence also points to this with the brief glimpses of Sara ? We get there. However, I don't believe she's the mastermind. If it's for her sake, then that wording wouldn't make sense if she's the one behind it. This is the part of the Memorandum Theory that I do subscribe to. I think the mastermind is the survivor of the first game, or at least that's my best guess. When I asked you guys for theories, I did get a comment that had theories of their own, so I'd like to read it out and respond. There are two, so we'll go in order. By Snowstorm the Boss. Miley is a character I actually find fascinating, as she's the only character we have seen act differently depending on whether or not she is the floor master. When she is the floor master, she acts like she wants the main cast to suffer. But when she is not the floor master, she acts more like a manager who makes sure the death game goes as planned. This makes me think that how she acts as a floor master is just an act, while her acting like a manager is how she really is. This being her real personality would explain why she cared so much about Ranger's chip, and why she had such a big problem with Gashu's transgression. Her interrupting the monitor was basically her telling Gashu to stick to the damn script. However, I feel that Miley has an agenda of her own. Why else would she give Sara their win rates in Chapter 2, Part 1? I am very interested to see what she will do in the final chapter. I agree. I already mentioned the Miley is Gein's mom theory, and I think that's the best we currently have if we are to outright give an answer. Second theory. Another theory that I have is that Meister is not actually Mr. Chidoin. I say this because I believe that Mr. Chidoin and Meister are actually doppelgangers. You see, the game went out of its way to make it clear that doppelgangers and the superstition surrounding them is important for the plot. For example, whenever Reko and her fake meet each other, Ranger tells them that they are doppelgangers and that one of them has to die for the other to live. On top of this, Kurumada mentioned that if a floor master meets their doppelganger, they die. This is an unresolved plot thread that is most likely going to be brought up in the final chapter. Seeing that there are only 3 floor masters live, and we saw both Miley and Sefalin bleed, Miley with Kai's frying pan and Sefalin cutting her hand in the medical room, only Meister can be a doll. So, because of the fact that doppelgangers have been mentioned twice, and because of this unresolved plot thread, I believe that the participants will try to kill Meister by having him meet his human counterpart, Mr. Chidoin. Yeah, I've been kind of dancing around it, but the common belief is that Mr. Chidoin is Meister, because Meister's poses are literally traced over his, and in the game files they are labeled as the same character. This is also a strong possibility. I do believe that piece of information will interplay. And I'm going to use this as a segue out of the theory recap and into my thoughts on the emotion root and the differences that will occur between the roots. I think that the emotion root will be the one where this will come into play. Why? Because while I do believe their escape attempt will fail, I don't see the root having a bad ending. I don't think either are going to. Or at least both roots will have their own true endings, and that's what I'm going to be talking about from now on, unless stated otherwise. So just take everything with the caveat that there could be splinter endings where things play out differently. So I believe that in the emotion route, the escape will fail and they will undergo the final main game. I was actually thinking about what could be the source of conflict in the final main game, since it seems like everyone is too united in this route for there to really be any. But I think I got it. All will be unraveled about Sada's involvement in the death game, and the rest will have to choose whether to trust her. And essentially, it's the trial of Sada Chidoin. But I believe the death game will end soon after, because the remaining 3 will end it through this doppelganger loophole, and we will have our final surviving roster for the group. So, to recap, my guess is that the logic route will have the final confrontation with So as its last discussion, and then the escape. Whereas in the emotion route, it will be the last main game, followed by their victory via doppelganger. Perhaps the latter will have more of a resolution between Sada and her father as well. Look, just because I don't think the logic route is the bad end, doesn't mean I think the emotion route will be. So what do I think the final rosters will be? This is fairly speculative, so take it with a grain of salt. I also don't really have evidence, just what I think makes sense writing-wise. So I think for the logic route, it will be Sada, So, and Gin. And for the emotion route, I think it will be Sada, Keiji, and Kana. I think So and Kana are self-explanatory. Any good ending in their routes will involve them making it to the end. It makes no thematic sense otherwise. So will beat the odds through finally connecting, and Kana will carry her newfound will to live on with the will of those who protected her to the end. So why do I have this split with Gin and Keiji? The most basic reason is that I don't think that Sada is going to end one route with specifically the 2 children alive and no one else. That seems a little too convenient. But more importantly, it's about focus. Gin isn't a character who really needs significant focus or development. Nor does Kana, as her arc is essentially complete. But if I asked you, out of all the roster who could potentially be alive right now, who do you think has the most work to do to wrap up their character arcs? There are 2 obvious answers, So and Keiji, and that's just it. I think the logic route will lay its focus on So, obviously, which leaves room for the emotion route to put more on Keiji. You might be wondering, but Nachos, you said that they are going to escape in the logic route, which means nobody else dies. I don't think it means that. I still believe there will be another death in the final act. And if it's going to be anyone, it will be Keiji in my opinion. How will he die? I could potentially see him staying back to complete some aspect of the escape plan, such as some kind of distraction. He was already fully ready to sacrifice himself at the banquet, and genuinely thought that was what was going to happen until it was revealed that Kyutaro tricked him too. So I don't see why he wouldn't be willing to do it again. Just my thoughts. Speaking of Keiji, what was his wish? We weren't shown what it was, and clearly that's because it'll contain some kind of reveal. I have a theory on this too. I think it could be possible his wish was, I want to speak to Mr. Policeman's kid, or something to that effect. And as we know, it's very likely this kid is Joe, as his dialogue in Japanese indicates this with a pun. Keiji knew he had a kid, and it likely haunted him ever since he shot his role model. To me, this explains the existence of the Joe AI. During his and Sada's first trial, there was the possibility that either or both of them could die. If Joe died here, he never would have met Keiji. Therefore, in order to keep their promise, Asunado whipped up an AI for Joe, as it would allow Keiji to meet him post-mortem. Of course, this didn't happen. Joe survived, so they met. This would also put an interesting perspective on how Joe was immediately distrustful of Keiji and even hesitated to reveal his name. One more thing. Your time to shine. It's really hard to theorize about the AIs since Asunado should not have AIs for the non-candidates besides Joe. Now, this could all just be an AU, in which case any theorizing we do to tie it to the main story may not even apply. But let's try anyway. So we know for certain they do not have those AIs at the time of the death game, which means they can't have them before either. The only possible conclusion is that it takes place in the future. How Asunado retrieved the memories and personalities from the corpses, I don't know. We don't know what their process is to begin with, and frankly, tech in the Your Turn to Die universe is basically magic, so let's just assume they can. So the best guess I've got is that the Sada we see running the AIs is the Sada who won the death game solo and became the new boss of Asunado. She's running this simulation over and over to either figure out something about the participants or to just watch them have fun and work together to cope. Since she won, I would assume she didn't escape, which means this could be a bad end to the emotion route. Again, as I said, I think it will have a good end, but this is an alternative outcome similar to the massacre ending. I'm not totally convinced on it, it's just a fun musing. That's all I've got to say. This video went on a lot longer than I expected, but it's good to have all my final theories down before we move on to the final chapter. Let the comment section be a dump for all of your own thoughts and theories so we can look back on this in the future and see what everyone was thinking. Whether it's about what I said here or completely unrelated, let's hear it. Remember to be respectful to everyone, as it's not the end of the world if someone has a different view of the funny video game than you. In time, we'll have our answers, and we'll see who was right and who wasn't. Whatever happens, I believe Nankidai is cooking something good for us. Before you go, I have a gift for you all. Certain sprites were data mined from the Steam release of the game, and there's a certain set that really makes you think. I'm not going to show them to you in the video to respect the official release and the people who don't want to be spoiled, but if that isn't a problem for you, I have one of the sprites linked in the description. Do not reference this sprite in any of your comments, please, for the sake of others. Either way, if you do choose to see it, I hope you can think about it and draw your own conclusions. I go by Tasty Nachos, and you go by